You don't ever have to have seen Riverdale on the CW to know the show is an over-the-top, convoluted, absurd teen drama that makes the plot of Lost look like a straightforward roadmap. Not only is the series infamous for its ridiculous storytelling, this year, in its final season, the writers opted to reset everything, mind-wiping the characters, sticking them back in high school, and transporting them into the 1950s. On this podcast, we like to discuss the most recent installment of a different series every show. This time, we're looking at the highly anticipated Season 7 premiere, Don't Worry Darling, of Riverdale. It's Thursday, March 30th, and you're listening to today's episode. This show has no shame. Imagine, as a fan, watching 6 seasons, investing that amount of time, trying to keep up with the plot, which, like they say itself, is like ridiculous. It's crazy. And then watching the characters grow, transition, become different versions of themselves, only for season 7 to come along, delete it all, straight up advertise that they're doing that, and then tell people that they don't have to understand it to jump in.
Well, I mean, I think that fans would be excited about that because it's almost like nostalgia in that way. When you get to season 7, a show can become stale pretty easily.
So if every show that reached season 7, they just reverted back to like pilot premise and just went in a different direction. I know that they're not doing that here because they're obviously taking place, 70 years in the past.
I think they said 67 years in the episode or something like that.
It's called A Fresh Start, and I get that they're trying to pull in a new audience. They might even be trying to pull in their old audience who they lost along the way, those like disenchanted fan base.
From what I understand, at least, it seems like Riverdale after the first season, or probably like after the second season, started, the storyline, like you said, kind of became haywire, and a lot of people jumped off the bandwagon.
Well, it's always had certain parts of the show that have remained consistent. Sex, drama, chaos, endless plot twists. Like, even if you go back to first season, I'm pretty sure all of those are very present. And this season, I felt like was just supposed to be Pleasantville.
Yeah, no, I can understand that comparison. I also have I thought really this reminded me of the Umbrella Academy.
Yeah.
Because of, especially in season 2 when they go back in time.
They go to the 60s.
They go to the 60s, but it was also kind of pulling in big issues like racism at the time.
That's the big one that it pulled in.
Yeah, as well as sexism for like Umbrella Academy. But also Dark as well, surprisingly. Because I remember in the season 3 premiere of Dark, they kind of almost redo the pilot. It just doesn't have the main character in it.
Yeah, I find it hard to compare anything to Dark. I feel like Dark stands alone. But the difference between this show and the comics has always been that the comics took place in Riverdale, the idyllic community where there's no mystery. It's just kind of like these kids hanging out, or the mysteries are easily solved. It's like Scooby-Doo almost. And this show was like a dark, angsty, edgy teen version of it, full of mystery and just serial killers and everything you could stick in. I like that they are kind of making it more like the comic book version here, even though I didn't even read the comics. The guy who created the show, Roberto Aguirre Sacasa, he's also someone who like they called in when Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark wasn't working, and he rewrote that. He did Pretty Little Liars Original Sin, which we did for the podcast.
Yeah, I remember that.
And he also created Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. He's the one who's kind of in charge of it. He's done interviews about this season. And he says there's not going to be like a main villain as much as just the time period and society at that time.
Well, there you go. I mean, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is basically this show, kind of what they did with
they're
that.
Literally connected. Like, they had crossover. They mentioned each other in each show.
Oh, well, yeah, okay.
So, like, I don't think you understand how crazy Riverdale got, and I'm not, I don't know too much about it, but I know last season they all had superpowers.
No, because we see a quick glimpse of that when Bailey's comment or whatever it was, like that woman is trying to hold it with all their strength.
That might have been the guardian angel, but I'm not sure. But they all had superpowers, is what I'm saying. Like, every single one of them was gifted a superpower.
So this turned into
like
a superpower show, almost kind of like also Stranger Things season 2 when they tried to introduce.
Mike
those
never had a
well.
superpower in Stranger Things.
I'm saying when they introduced Eleven's.
Yeah, but they didn't introduce new characters with superpowers, so they gave the original characters superpowers. Anyways, but we're talking too much, I think, about the past, even though we've never seen it. We should talk about strictly this this episode, all right, and I do find it funny that it's labeled "Don't Worry, Darling." All of them are like titles to movies, and that movie just came out.
Not only that, it actually, they're mentioning Emmett Till. The Till movie came out in 2022, and then in the previews they showed Elvis, and that movie came out in 2022 as well. And that was actually one of my pros. The references they're using are pretty recent. I mean, only a couple months old.
It's somehow both pulling in from like old stuff, but also being recent, like modern versions of old things.
It's funny you say that because the first thing we see in the show is this record player, and we see it continually move, and I was like, are they making fun of Arcane? I was ready to get annoyed with it, and then no, it instead transitions straight into Happy Days.
Well, it didn't transition. That's how Happy Days started too.
Yeah.
Like the whole entire intro was a Happy Days intro, and since I watched TV Land as a kid, and that was like over Disney or Nickelodeon, I was just always a TV Land guy. And yeah, so that brought back some memories.
That was one of my favorite parts of the episode. I thought that actually started out well. I was actually engrossed in it.
Yeah, the references to I Love Lucy were there as well. They brought up Natalie Wood. It's always cool to see like Molly Ringwald from the 80s playing a character. She plays Archie's mom.
Oh, really? Mary?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess, if that's her name.
Yeah.
But the storylines that are mainly going on in this episode is Jughead trying to explain what happened to us, the audience, not even to the characters. Then also Jughead trying to remind his friends who they are and where they're actually from.
So when the episodes focused on that, I just wanted to comment on that really fast. Mm-hmm. I actually found it to be good, and it focused on that for a good 20 minutes, and I was thinking, am I actually going to give this Riverdale episode a passing grade? Because I actually did
You came in there with a bias saying this is going to suck.
Oh, yeah.
Or that this is going to be so convoluted that I'm not going to give it.
Or I thought to myself it could possibly be a Gossip Girl esque type TV show, but no, I was actually I really liked the scene, and we'll probably get there, but when Jughead is trying to convince all the other people that he's actually from the future, when it focused on those parts of the storyline, I did enjoy the show, unironically.
Yeah. I also want to talk about that a lot, but it's in my pros and cons. The other two storylines I need to mention, though, is because Jughead is the narrator. I mentioned those first, but there's also Tony trying to get her article published about Emmett Till addressing racial discrimination in the school paper. Yes. However, since it's 1950, the principal doesn't want to do it. And then the last storyline, which is Veronica's, because she's just moved into town from LA, and they've exaggerated, or she's exaggerating why she's there. And then the truth comes out, but she's also getting hit on by every guy.
Yeah, originally she said that she came to a small town because she's going to be an actress in a big movie, and then it's revealed later on that
she does have a connection. Yeah. Her mom and dad are the I Love Lucy, the Ricky Ricardo and Lucille Ball of that time period. I think her name is Hermione, and then her dad's name is, he was the villain of the first 6 seasons. It doesn't matter Hiram? Okay. But yeah, let's just go into pros and cons. Right?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so my first one was the Happy Days intro. Mm-hmm. The TV Land, the references to I Love Lucy. I think that definitely stood out as a great way to begin a season, especially if you're reintroducing a completely different personality to the characters that you've already defined.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you agree with this, but even the narration when Jughead was, like you were saying, talking to the audience, because the first thing he's talking about is kind of the Emmett Till situation as well, because it's right after the trial took place.
His girlfriend in the past, or in the other, is Tabitha. So it makes sense that he would go directly there since she is black.
Yeah, and even that narration when he was describing all that stuff, I didn't find too bad. The first scene actually made me interested in what the rest of the show was.
It wasn't overwhelming. It didn't take 20 minutes for him to explain what went on. I said it in the intro. So yeah, it was in the introduction also of each character. Archie, Betty, Jughead, Veronica, Cheryl, Tabitha, Tony, Julian, Kevin. That sounds like a lot of names, but it really isn't. I feel like we got a good initiation from all of them, and we were really lucky because any other episode I feel like would have been so heavy on the plot that we wouldn't have known anybody, and they described their connections for us. That's not the norm for the show, is what I'm trying to say, and so that's a pro for this episode.
So they kind of toned down the complexity, I guess.
Again, it's an introduction for not only those who are continuing, who've watched it the whole way through, but also for that new audience that they want to bring aboard.
One of my pros I had for the show, much like Umbrella Academy, and you can probably point to any other show that takes place in the past as well, was just the costume design and set design. It was incredibly colorful. It reminded me almost of the Saved by the Bell reboot, and I thought, and it was just really pleasing to look at.
Yeah, and that goes along with what I was talking about with the being accurate with the comics, because the costumes were certainly way more like themselves in the comic books down to Jughead's hat or whatever that is, the thing that
I could not get over
the
that.
S on his shirt.
That whole episode, he just had that thing on his head. It was so distracting to me.
But that's the comic. You got the timeline, the Archie's vehicle, the 1950s vernacular, all of that super comic booky. And so, yeah, I agree. That is another pro. I also like that it still retains some of the CW-ness that makes it different. You know, like it still had the mystery, it still had a little bit of the sex, but mostly the mystery element was there because of Jughead knowing what was going on.
Right, exactly.
If he didn't know what was going on, then I feel like this would have made a way worse episode.
Oh, yeah.
Because it would have just been like, I don't know, nothing to guide us, nothing to keep us afloat.
Again, he's the main character, so you're
feels
able
like the
to
main
see
character.
everything kind of through his eyes. And I think Jughead was my favorite character. I think he's kind of supposed to be, but also because Cole Sprouse, I grew up watching Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, and it was like my favorite show. In
You
fact,
still watch it? No, I'm just kidding.
absolutely not. But I'm actually going to see his brother Dylan Sprouse in a movie in the next coming couple of days, so
Cool.
I found that like funny as well.
Yeah. Get to your next pro.
Okay, so actually, again, it deals with the important issues of race, and also the references the James Dean car as well. Even though that storyline, I didn't really see how it was going to fit into place, because Archie's mom doesn't want him driving it to school because of the way that James Dean
The hot rod?
I found that funny. But also, even though it was only like 2 scenes, I thought that it kind of introduced Mary and Archie well.
Like, oh, you mean their relationship,
Their relationship,
the mom,
their chemistry, yeah.
The son, and yeah, because his dad had passed away in the war. They said it was the Korean War. I think it's probably different in the first few seasons. I want to shift gears and then talk about a little bit at the end. This was my next pro, was when the other Tabitha arrived. So you have 2 versions of Tabitha. One who is brainwiped like everybody else, and then you have Guardian Angel Tabitha, who Jughead has been searching out this whole time, and she arrives, and he's happy to see her because they've had a relationship. And then it just, when she explained what was going on, and then she opened the door to what she needed to do, she said, I need to go to all the different places in our timeline and change certain things or see if they're changing. And that opens the door, kind of like Avengers, the one with Thanos, where, is that Endgame? Where they go back in time and you see scenes from the earlier movies. That would be so cool. If just the idea of that potential possibility makes me put this in a pro, because I think that would be really cool to watch Tabitha's character interacting and the characters themselves having to react scenes that they've already done.
So you know what? I actually, when Tabitha showed up at the very end of the episode, I had that listed and still listed as a con, but now that you say that, it does seem like that could be a cool direction for the show. I know that the Venture Bros, before it got canceled, kind of was setting up for an episode like that anyways. Yeah. But yeah, being able to always see like old scenes recreated is definitely cool. And yeah, just knowing that might be a possibility now, I actually might change that to a pro. Yeah.
Okay. I have 2 more pros. Do you have any?
No. I
okay, so I'll just go through mine. Sometimes it's annoying to see kids playing teens. At this point, though, with like taking the justification for it into consideration, in that it's season 7 and how old they actually are, I find it hilarious. I give it a pro because the only thing that I would want to see more is if they cast some 14-year-olds to be walking the hall so that it was like the Wet Hot American Summer remake.
Yeah,
that would be awesome. Hello, fellow kids.
I do have to say, though, the show has justification for that.
Yeah.
Like, you can actually give it more of a pass than other shows or movies that do the same thing.
Yeah, and because they didn't do what I just said, it makes it seem a little bit more realistic. But when they were being taught by the teachers or Archie was being scolded by his mom, it did make me just Archie, you are
Archie
25 to 30 years old.
Yeah, I was like, there's no way.
The actor's actually younger than most of the rest of the cast. He's only like 25. So he started when he was like 18. So
it's like even Cole Sprouse, I think he's like 30 years old.
I think it's because he dyes his hair and it just makes him look a little strange, but it also makes him look comic booky, so that's why I think they cast him that way. My last pro, though, is the scene you were talking about earlier, Jughead's scene, the one where he not only has to explain to everybody who they actually are by trying to use a time capsule that he finds, which I have no idea why the time capsule would still exist in this like parallel universe.
He didn't explain that really well, but
No, but what I liked about it was they first meta-critiqued, he meta-critiqued their own franchise when he was going through every single character and who they were, and so like he was able to point out the plot holes almost, and then he got to Kevin, who in the show has always been gay, but now he's dating this other, and he had to like wiggle around that by being like, you really like musicals and blah blah blah. So I'm sure that's going to be the next societal issue that they're going to confront at some point. But more importantly, when he gets to trying to explain what modern day
life, yeah,
and he
yeah.
struggles so
That
hard,
was my
like
favorite
who
part,
hasn't run through that thought experiment in their head? If it's like somehow you became a time traveler and you were in this cool adventure and you had to blast back in the past and you met someone that you really wanted to talk to and you wanted to explain the truth, how would you convince them? And he goes about it just about as well as you could if you were doing it on the fly.
He brings up
cell
smartphones.
I mean, that's a smart idea, but at the same time, he probably, if he had really thought about it, could have brought up some like events that occur that are more realistic or more close to that timeline so that it seems more realistic.
Yeah, something like maybe 10 years out.
Still, really fun scene to watch. So that was my last pro. And yeah, let's transition over to cons right now. But how are you feeling just from the pros? Like, does that carry enough weight to pass the show?
To me,
or the episode?
No.
No, okay, all right. So let's segue into cons. What's your first one?
It was very heavy-handed, especially when it got later into the episode. I think that racism is fine if you want to like address that in your show. It's a serious problem, but the way that the show went about it, I felt was so preachy, especially by the end. Like when Tony, and I forgot her friend's name that she's kind of with in the episode, but when they like decide to read
Betty?
the poem, it might be Betty.
Which one are you talking about? Betty's the one who's in charge of the paper. Who's the like the main love interest of Archie, and then Tony is obviously the one who wrote it.
Yeah.
And then Cheryl's the one who was on the announcements.
Okay, so that was Betty. Yeah, because that's what I was saying. When like Tony is the one that reads the poem by Tennessee. No, it wasn't Tennessee Williams.
By Langston
Hughes. Yeah, that's who it was.
Yeah.
And I thought that like the fact that poem was somehow able to change the whole entire school's perspective on everything. I found that like so unbelievable, and again kind of preachy and ham-fisted.
Okay, all right. No, I sort of agree with you there. That was sort of my second con, but I do have a little bit more to say about it. First of all episode, Tony is trying to get her article published, which is great, right? She's written this really eye-opening, well-written, very important piece that she wants everybody to be able to read. And I think she's going about it the right way, going to Betty, because Betty's going to side with her. And Betty finally realizes how much this means, right? Mm-hmm. And so she puts her own like neck on the line and says, I will go ahead and publish this. And that's when Tony has this revelation and she says no. And at that point, I was like, "What are you doing? This is exactly what you need to do." But she's like, "I know better. What we need to do is on the announcements, on the morning announcements, state a poem."
Yeah, it didn't make much sense at all.
What upset me about it is like maybe in the 1950s, morning announcements are different or stand in a higher regard than they do nowadays. But if you were anything like the morning announcements that I attended in my high school, when like you would be sitting in class, it would be so bright and early. 75% of the kids would be zoned out. They wouldn't even be looking at the TV, right? Mm-hmm. And this is on the intercom, so you don't even get that visual stimuli. You're just listening to something that you hear every single day. And they come on and they drone on for a while. If they came on and they said, we're going to now give a little poem, I feel like you would lose that remaining 25%, at least by half. Yeah. And without, let's say, the non-diegetic parallel background music, this would not have been the King's Speech. But because it did have the music swell, and because everybody was shown looking at the speaker fondly and like gravitatingly like pulling in this information, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It worked. So not for me as the audience member, I was like, I still think you should have just published it. But for the class, of course, it's going to work. And that's where I think your actual con was like more the Hollywoodization of whenever they do a 1950s plot now or 1960s plot, whenever they go into the past, kind of like with Umbrella Academy, they feel like they have to bring up racial discrimination, and that's completely fair and it should be talked about, but then they always feel like they need to fix it in some way. And Jughead's thing makes it even worse at the very end, because he's like, all they had to do was read this poem over the announcements and we sped up equality by 20 years. And I was just like, that's an insult. That's honestly an insult to discriminate, like the way that how strong and stubborn that has been in the like the idea that so I agree, that is a con for me. I think she should have just taken Betty up on the offer.
You said you had a con
before that
right?
Though, it was kind of also the Jughead scene at the very end when he forgets his memories. Because that's the final twist, right?
Yeah.
Is that Tabitha, the guardian angel Tabitha, says, you're messing this all up. I need to be able to do my thing, but you need to forget. And so they make out and he forgets. But
yeah. Also, I wanted to bring up that makeout scene really fast. They copied Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Him, the very ending where a kiss apparently makes you forget your memory, and it just felt so CW anyways that I was like, I was kind of zoning out by that point.
Oh, I didn't mind the kiss. It was the fact that he still remembered for a little bit and he didn't just grab a napkin and start jotting away. He had to go running all the way home and get on his typewriter thinking, I can't forget. You had so much time to just grab a pen, find a pen, start jotting notes down. And obviously, by the time he got to the typewriter, he wrote 3 words, and the 3 words he decides to do don't even help him.
Bend towards justice.
Yeah, it doesn't help you.
Also, why do you put the period after every single one?
He was really trying to, I'm not going to forget any of this. But, he didn't even say, ask Archie about what I said, or, something that would remind him that he'd already kind of given away to some people what he believed.
Well,
which would have at least, raised his suspicion.
It wasn't only that. It was the fact, I had as my pro, again, that Cole Sprouse, Jughead being my favorite character was because he knew so much about the time, and he was the only one that knew what was going on. I don't know how many episodes this season is supposed to be, but now whoever is going to be watching the show for the rest of the season has to deal with so many episodes and so many scenes of characters that literally have no idea, and you don't even have Jughead there to really, help you with the plot because he doesn't remember anything either.
Yeah, it has implications on the show as a whole because, like you just said, it makes it really interesting when they had a dynamic where one person was aware. You could really side with that person, put your mind to that person because you are that audience member who has gone with him through that journey. But now I feel like they've nerfed him, but I feel like they can't nerf him for too long. This is now going to be a whole arc of who's going to remember first or how they're going to get back to their old lives. It's just going to take a lot longer now.
It can't really be Jughead, can it?
They gave themselves an excuse as writers to kind of concentrate on the weaker elements. Mm-hmm. Now that Jughead's out of the way, the only person who could really throw a wrench into things and solve things too quickly, but the way he wants to solve it is get Archie and Betty to make out over the bed. Archie and Betty don't even have a relationship really too much in this world. Archie is once again into Veronica, and from what I understand, he had gotten over her by the time season 6 rolled around.
There's one other thing that happens at the very end of the episode. It's the last thing we see is Jughead picking up his beanie, which I guess he had been looking for throughout the episode.
No, the opposite. It was in the time capsule originally, and he knew that it was missing. But then by the time he picked it up I think it's a metaphor for his memories. Those are where the memories are stored, almost and once I don't know. Obviously, once they touch it, it doesn't make a difference. Yeah. But it just signifies that they've forgotten. It does also feel like one of the cons that I have here is that Veronica was supposed to be a sympathetic character. Obviously, she has a high living lifestyle, but she was lying and she was called out by that lie from Cheryl, who was jealous of her. But she still has a bunch of guys who are fawning over her. She still has parents who are super rich, and as much as she wants to sell the fact that they ditched me, they left her in a really super nice apartment by herself as a high schooler, just getting to do whatever she wants.
They're still checking in on her too.
Still checking in on her.
Midway through
I feel
the episode,
like most high schoolers would take that 100% of the time. The only rule they put down is don't allow boys to the apartment. Right. Okay, fine. Also, the actress's age, again, plays a factor. And, when I'm watching this, I'm like, you are a full-blown adult. You don't need your parents calling you to say or feel bad about your parents not seeing them every single day. Yeah.
The show introduced so many different characters. Yeah, and again, I'm a first-time watcher that I didn't feel like some of the characters that had lines this episode got the time of day. It really only focused on 5 characters.
Oh, we have a reverse pro-con then. Yeah, because remember in my pros I said that it was easy for us to understand the characters, but not for you?
Well, I'm saying that I just felt like some of them, I know that for people who have watched a television show, they know these characters well. So this is really...
But who did you feel was underrepresented? I'm not talking about the parents.
I didn't even get some of the names. That's
yeah, but the people themselves, you could tell that, I'm trying to think of the weakest ones here. Cheryl and her brother Julian, right?
Yeah. Her brother Julian, I didn't really get a good
sense of. But he does you got that he likes Veronica, right?
Yeah, and who was the person that Archie was kind of competing against? Was that Julian as well? The one for
Veronica.
Again. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Because the red hair sticks out, that's why. They're all redheads. Another thing that they all are, or at least their families are is connected to some form of media or local, okay, Veronica's parents were big time Hollywood, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then Betty's parents were local media big. And then
they are the ones also who when Tony comes to them are no, we're not going to read the thing on it.
It just felt and then also Cheryl's parents also, the mom there seemed like she was super important too. So it was everybody's a really super rich kid back in the 1950s. Weird. And then except for that, I more have questions than anything else. One question I have that may turn into a con is Tabitha, because with her guardian angel version going off into a different universe, and so she's no longer going to be there, and then also the other version of her in this timeline going off on like the Emmett Till, like they're doing some sort of state by state thing, right? Like they're going state by state and doing parades and or not parades, you know what I'm saying? But they're kind of writing her out in a way, and so some fans have speculated that possibly she's just not going to be there, and that would take away from the potential of the character, and it would also make me like, you've taken away Jughead, you've taken away the guardian angel, now you're just left with the 1950s plot. What are you going to do with that?
No, I agree.
Drama?
That's why I was thinking, especially when you were talking about like the episode or possibly episodes where we could see her go into all these different time periods. She's definitely going to be gone, I feel like, or that version of her is going to be gone for a majority of the season, and I would say we're not going to see her till the very end of the season either.
That would suck. I think that's a bad decision if that's true. It was weird also that the Bailey's Comet still existed in this world or whatever.
But it's 2 years out.
Or why the time capsule still exists. Do you think they're going to go through 2 years in this? Or do you think it's going to be like a 5 or 6 episodes thing and then they're going to jump?
No, I think the Bailey's Comet thing is going to happen at the end of the season. I think that, it's going to probably be 2 years. This season's going to go through 2 years probably.
All right. My other comparison for the show, because we brought up Umbrella Academy, is Lock and Key. There are so many times where high schoolers in that show who still remember start forgetting, or their parents forget, and they have to try to convince them that things are real, that are crazy. And so that's what it felt like with Jughead, was that he was trying to convince a bunch of people who had just like lost their memories because that's what was happening. Altogether, though, I really enjoyed this episode.
Wait, what? Hold on. You're going to give it a passing grade?
Oh, I'm going to give it an 8 because I think...
An 8?
The episode itself, not the show. The show could, as a whole, be as awful as anything because of the convoluted storytelling. But I think this specific episode, anybody can come in and enjoy because of how, as long as they realize what CW is, they'll sit in this and they'll be like, well, this is kind of a fun little jaunt.
I mean, there's so much that has been done in other CW shows. You know, like even like when you talk about random parts such as even Jughead like burying up the time capsule, and then there's like an ominous figure that's kind of like staring at him, and like the kiss and all that stuff.
But we do so many pilots where it feels like everybody's still kind of acclimating to one another. They don't actually know each other. These characters felt like they'd been in a show for 7 years together, but now
I'll give you that, but I mean, still, that is not the grade I'm going to give this.
I mean, I'm just saying that I would recommend this specific episode to people to just hang out and watch for fun, you know? And then after that, don't watch the rest of the show. It's like the reverse. I'm not saying I see potential for the show because I don't really, but I see this episode as kind of a standout, fun one to have watched, and I feel like I know the show better because of it.
I'll say also one comparison I didn't say for this show is it reminded me of School Spirits. I'm going to give it a lot lower score than you would. Like I said, if they focus on the timeline storyline, I maybe could have given it a pass. I'm going to give it like a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, you said that sort of when you said that you weren't going to pass it earlier, and I was like, maybe I can convince them if we go through all the little facts, but apparently not.
Katie Keene as well. We did that show.
Well, that's a spinoff.
We did that show so long ago that you can't even find the podcast that we did for it as of now. But the like writing and the costuming definitely reminded me of that as well. That was based
weird because
that was based on a comic book series as well, right?
Yes, Katie Keene is a character in Archie. They're literally connected.
I forgot that.
It's seriously a spinoff. And also, I remember the game that we played in that where I said that, like, because it's all DC universe, and so the multiverse does exist to a certain extent. She met the Punisher, I think, and they like hung out and they went
Marvel.
To like,
Punisher's Marvel.
What?
Yeah.
Then she did meet the Punisher.
No, I remember you saying the Punisher, yeah, and then she threw a cake at him instead of like having a fight with him or something.
Yeah, I guess it is Marvel. No, maybe they're connected. You know, sometimes like there's weird crossovers and stuff. I'd have to go back to that one. Wow, good memory. Anything else you want to say about it, though, besides that 5 out of 10? I give it an 8 out of 10. I'm saying go watch the specific episode if you're just looking to see an episode of Riverdale.
It is an episode that, like, I would probably, like you're saying, recommend to people who have never seen an episode of it anyway.
Sure.
But, yeah, okay, yeah. No, I'm kind of done.
All right, well, thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.